Good morning, classes, sixth graders, Rogers distance learning students. It is Tuesday, April 21st. And before we get into today's lesson, I thought I would take you to a weather website, which I look at every day to get the forecast. This one, in case I don't know if you have a site already, but this is really, if not the best, one of the best sites out there. It's NOAA.gov. That's National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration is what the NOAA stands for. And this is the go-to site for weather. So before I give you today's forecast, I just thought I'd share this with you since this is kind of what we're learning about, global warming. They had a big headline when you go onto their site that said Earth had its second hottest March on record. Earth had its second hottest March on record. I think they've been keeping records for probably 150 years or close to that. So just a couple highlights from this piece here that relate to what we're learning in class. It says here that the average global temperature, and they include temperatures on the surface of Earth's oceans and on all of Earth's continents. So they take all that, then they come up with an average, and it says here that March of this year was 2.09. That's more than 2 degrees above the average 20th century temperature for the month of March. So for those 100 years between 1900 and 1999, those 100 years of average March temperatures, this March that we just went through was 2 degrees warmer. Okay. Matter of fact, for the last 150 years, the 10 warmest Marches on record have all been since 1990. I know it seems like a long time ago to you. I was about halfway to where I am now in 1990. If that makes any sense. There's a really cool, and I can't even see it with my glasses on, a really cool diagram here though that talks about some of the specific effects of the greenhouse effect and what it's doing to the temperature of the planet. And the whole phenomenon of global climate change, which is really global warming at this moment. That's the change. It's warming, right? Anyway, it says Arctic sea ice extent. So there's a little snippet here on the Arctic sea ice and also the Antarctic sea ice. And then it gives you a little breakdown by each of the continents. So anyway, I just thought I would bring that to your attention. Again, that's NOAA.gov. That's where I get all my weather forecasts from. Now, like I said, you can see, if you've looked outside at all or been outside today, that this is not going to be a center cut, top shelf weather day for our outdoor fans. 06902, just punch in our zip code, full local forecast, and what do we got here? Loading, here we go. Here's the forecast. Now, again, keep in mind, I'm doing this Monday, it's pre-recorded, so I can have it all ready for you guys when you get up and going in the morning. But here, as of 4:08 Monday afternoon, here's the forecast for Tuesday. Showers and possibly a thunderstorm, mainly after 4 p.m. Okay, so if you're going to get out and try to do anything, try to get it done before the late afternoon. The winds are going to be 10 to 17 miles an hour with gusts as high as 29 miles an hour, so almost 30-mile-an-hour wind gusts. Doesn't say what direction they're coming out of. And based on the temperatures, I can't really tell either. I can't see that, sometimes you can see the temperatures we get warmer or we get colder, and then that means that what kind of air mass is here and how it's getting pushed out and what's pushing it out of the way. And we've learned about fronts where two air masses of different temperatures and pressures collide, things like that. But it's hard to really tell because the temperatures for tomorrow don't seem to be a whole lot different than they are for today. But anyway, chance of precip is 80%. That's pretty high. Although the new rainfall amounts aren't really that big. They're only between 1/10 of an inch and 1/4 of an inch. So even though there's a high chance that it's going to rain, it's not going to really unleash a huge amount of water on us. So I don't think we have coastal flooding issues or anything like that for tomorrow. So that's that. That's the weather report. From there, we get into our very last lesson and our very last day, with the exception of our review and unit test for this weather and climate unit. By the way, you probably already know this, but your 5th and final unit this year is, take my glasses off because you should be able to see this screen. Solar system and beyond. The solar system and beyond. Okay. So anyway, I have my distance learning document open. You usually get that first, so I'm assuming you guys will open that up. And if you decide to tune in to this this video, what am I calling them? Video aid? I don't know. Video support? That's not the word I'm looking for. Video guide, maybe? Who knows? Whatever. Anyway, you can see the introduction on the guide in light blue lettering. Says that yesterday we kicked off activity 16, global warming, which we did. I hope you did too. I've been getting classwork coming in from about a little more than half the 6th graders so far. Probably there's about 90 of you. I'd say about 60 of you have submitted your classwork as of this time on Friday, a little bit after 4 o'clock. We used a website yesterday to explore through a few narratives, passages of a narrative that is, and tied together some of what we already learned about the relationship of weather and climate, how they're similar, how they're different. By the way, if you weren't sure, and you'll probably see this on Thursday's unit test, I'll just go over with you because this is an important 6th grade science concept for this unit. I had a frog in my throat, so let me loosen it up a little bit. The relationship between weather and climate. It's so important that you guys understand that weather and climate both talk about precipitation and temperature. They both have to do with what's going on outside. Okay. After that, the rest of the relationship is differences. Those are the similarities. Okay? The rest is different. Weather is what's going on outside at a very specific time and place. Okay? It could be an exact moment. The weather at an exact moment, or it could be, like I just read to you, the forecast for Tuesday, April 21st, 2020. It could be for a whole day. It could even be for a week. Matter of fact, they give weekly forecasts or 10 or 14-day forecasts. If you go to weather.com or you go to NOAA.gov, you can get those too. That's the weather. What's going on outside at a specific time, an hour, a day, a week, what have you, in a specific place. Climate is also what's going on outside. I'm looking out the window right now, at a not at a specific time and place, at a specific place, but the place can be a lot bigger. Like you could be talking about the climate of Stanford, but you could be talking about the climate of the bigger region or area that Stanford is a part of, like the Northeast United States. We live in a severe climate area or zone, along with all the other states that surround Connecticut. So it's not as specific a place. It's usually a little larger area or region. And it's over a very, very, very long period of time. Now, if you've been thinking a lot about what you've been reading and exploring and watching videos of, then you know this, because we've talked about this early and often, okay? Climate is the average weather, which is really precipitation and temperature, over a very, very long period of time. What does very, very long mean to you? Well, it might seem very long. It's 30 years or more. For someone of my vintage, going down the slope, not up the slope. I won't bore you with any more of that stuff. 30 years doesn't seem as long, but 30 years is 30 years. So anyway, yeah, climate is the average weather over a very long period of time. Okay. So when you see questions like that on tomorrow's Kahoot or Thursday's unit test, I hope what I spent the last 5 minutes talking to you about here helps. In the meantime, my computer, if you watch these video guides, you know this happens to me. Went in sleep mode, so I gotta wake it up. Okay, so that's weather and climate, and that was the first passage in the narrative yesterday that we read. Now we also got into the greenhouse effect at the end of last week, and one of those three passages, I believe, was about the greenhouse effect, but I don't know, maybe it's coming up today. I can't really remember which of the five it was in. Anyway, we need to understand the relationship, the connection, what the greenhouse effect and global climate change have to do with each other. And they are intertwined, they are connected. And you know a little bit about the greenhouse effect from what we began exploring last week. And I'm not going to steal the thunder of today's lesson, because you're going to learn, you're going to find out, you're going to investigate the connection between the greenhouse effect and the current period of global climate change. We'll call it global warming, that we are all experiencing along with Mother Earth. Okay, so that's the preview for today. We roll down to the classwork, and you're not going to need your textbook today. We're not doing anything directly from the textbook. The one little thing we are, I just cut and paste it right into today's distance learning doc. So you don't need the textbook today. Step number one asks you to go back to Climate Kids, the NASA site. And the link is right there in step number one. So you click on that. That takes you to Climate Kids. You scroll down to the fourth passage. Now I'm on step number 2 in the doc today. The fourth passage is titled, What Causes Climate Change? Okay, what causes climate change is the fourth passage in the What is Climate Change narrative. And that's where we start today. So now in that passage, it's not only 3 short paragraphs of reading and thinking about the written information, but before that, there's actually a computer animation of the greenhouse effect. And I think, I don't know where, but whether it was Brain Pop or I just can't remember the tasks that I had you guys get into last week when we started learning about the greenhouse effect. But I think this animation is familiar. I think you've seen it before. But if not, take a couple minutes before you read those 3 short paragraphs of that fourth passage. Sorry. Talking too fast. And look at that animation. Okay. So step 2, part B, read the 3 short paragraphs, which should kind of firm up or reinforce what you know so far about the greenhouse effect. Okay? This is learning. I say it when I say it. Every now and then you hear me. I sprinkle it in. But to get good at anything, you have to spend time on it. You have to go over it. I've talked about how I have to read stuff over and over again. I don't have a great comprehension level, and I told you why. So I made some bad choices when I was young in my language arts classes and reading, and blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. Anyway, you have to think about what you're doing when you do it to get more out of it and to learn more, advance faster, whatever you want to say. So this is no different than the things that, I don't want to presume that you don't enjoy science class, but let's just say it could be hard and some of you guys are grinding it out. You're warriors, and I appreciate that. But you gotta spend time with stuff, and you gotta think about it and go over it and do things multiple times. So that's why I think about that all the time when I'm planning our lessons, because I want to make sure I give you guys multiple opportunities to consider the same information. And as we go from like the first time you see it to maybe the last time you see it in a group of lessons, we're building, we're taking that initial idea and we're adding stuff onto it, and hopefully by the time it's all said and done, you know more than you did when we started. So anyway, hopefully you paused the video at some point now and you completed step number 2, which was to view the animation, read the 3 short paragraphs, and then in part C, to write in your notes those 2 questions and then respond to them in your notes. The 2 questions are Roman numeral 1, that's a lowercase I, by the way. What types of human activities are changing Earth's natural greenhouse? Okay, don't get confused by Earth's natural greenhouse. So what they mean by that, if you're wondering, okay, is we know that there are releases of greenhouse gases that have always occurred on Earth. They come from volcanic eruptions. They come from animals, and their waste produces a lot of methane. And you may recall that methane is a lot more powerful a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. So you know how there's so many more people on the planet today. If you go back, what would seem like an infinitesimal, a super long period of time for you guys, say 150, 200 years, there's just a fraction of the human population that exists on Earth today. And that means that there was a fraction of all the farm animals that we demand as a species to feed ourselves on the Earth also, okay? So there's a lot more methane being produced, and now some of it's natural. It's always been around, and that's tying back to what they mean by Earth's natural greenhouse. And then, obviously, as you know, when humans exhale or mammals exhale, they release the air that they inhaled, but once you take it into your body, I don't know if you've had a chance to consider this. Maybe you know a lot about this, maybe you don't. But when you bring in the air, you inhale, you use that oxygen in the air. Your blood cells react chemically with that oxygen. And they use that, it oxygenates the blood. But the result of that is then when we breathe out or exhale, the composition of gases coming out is not the same as the composition going in. Yeah, it's still air, but it's a slightly different mix of gases. A little bit less oxygen, a little bit more CO2, carbon dioxide, okay? And that's a greenhouse gas, okay? So this is all natural, okay? But let me bring this back because we're back in sleep mode. And I think I keyed it in wrong. Yeah, all right, sorry. Get up, get a stretch if you haven't done it already. Get a drink of water. Do some calisthenics. 20 push-ups. 20 sit-ups. Stomach crunches. Stretches. Toe touches. Yada yada. Blah blah blah. Wah wah wah. Okay, here we go. Let's see. Please hook me up here. Oh, what am I doing? Third time's the charm. Thank you. Okay, so where am I? Step 2, part C. First question: what types of human activities are changing Earth's natural resources? Okay, there are some in those 3 short paragraphs you just read. There are some specific human activities that we're doing now and have been for about 100, 150 years, depending on exactly what it was, that humans didn't do for the thousands of years before this that we've been on the planet. And we're doing more and more of them, and there are more and more of us doing that. So that's the first question. See if you can find from those 3 short paragraphs what the answer to that is. And then there's a second question, Roman numeral 2, 2 small i's. How are these human activities changing the planet? Okay, so those are the activities. Hopefully you figured out what they were. You looked back at those 3 short paragraphs, and you were able to locate, the specific human activities today that are changing Earth's natural greenhouse. So the follow-up to that is, how are they changing? And this is simple. I've mentioned it a couple of times already. It has something to do with the title of this activity, 16. So hopefully that's not too much of a stretch for you. Again, with these questions, guys, these are meant not to drive you nuts. So if sometimes you're just not going to get something, whatever it is, my brain's just not where it needs to be at that moment. So these are questions that are designed for you to write them down, think about them. If you don't already remember what you just read or just did in the lesson, and you can't just take that idea from your head and transfer it onto your paper, then you take a couple of minutes. Maybe go back into the text. But don't spend more than 3 to 5 minutes on these questions. They're not designed or intended for you guys to spend that much time on. So if you're stuck, just move on after you've spent, say, 5 minutes. Okay, give it your best shot, because we should not be spending more time in our distance learning lessons on science than we do in the classroom. Okay, on to step 3. We go to the last passage. It's titled, Does What We Do Matter? Does what we do matter? Are our actions making a difference? The human activities that we just got done referring to, okay? So in this last passage, there's a very short video clip, and it's going to illustrate through a very specific example of a change. I won't get into it too much, but it's going to show you visually the Arctic sea ice and what it looks like now, and then what it looks like, I believe, each year from 2020 going all the way back over 35 years back to 1984. So it's going to start off in 1984, and I think they're going to give you like one little snapshot of each year and then put those 36 years of Arctic sea ice images together in a stream, and you're going to get to see over that 3.5 decades or so what the Arctic sea ice looks like and how it's changed, if it's changed. Okay, so watch that video clip. Then there are 3 more short paragraphs to read, and when you do all of that in your notes, I want you to write down and answer the following question, okay, that relate to that video and those 3 short paragraphs. This is, again, the last passage in the narrative, titled, Does What We Do Matter? Okay? The question I want you to write down in your notes, think about, and answer is, what are all the things on Earth, when we put them together, when we combine them, all of the things that give us our global climate? The answer is in those 3 short paragraphs. And the answer is so much of what we spent this whole unit introducing and investigating, weighing, okay, learning. Okay, there's a list of phenomena that occur on the surface and just above the surface. And it's in those 3 short paragraphs. So that's the question. Hopefully you won't have a hard time finding the answer. Okay. From there, we get off of Climate Kids and we basically just look at step 4 in the distance learning doc. And it says to consider the following situation. Okay. Here's the situation. Okay. Consider the following situation. Okay. Your friend, whomever, this is hypothetical. Your friend says and claims that there's nothing that humans can do about global warming. That's how your friend feels. There's nothing that humans can do about global warming. Okay? And your friend says this because your friend believes that Earth's temperature is always slowly rising. Okay? So that's your friend's thought. Okay? And they're sharing it with you. Okay? Your friend says there's nothing that humans can do about global warming since Earth's temperature has always been slowly rising. Okay. In that hypothetical situation, I want you to, again, this is right from the distance learning doc. 1, do you agree or disagree with your friend? So that's simply, I agree with my friend, I disagree with my friend. Period. That's step 1. Now here's the real science, okay? Step 2. Support your answer with evidence from what you've learned about since last Friday when we introduced the greenhouse effect. What you've learned about the greenhouse effect and global climate change. Taking all that knowledge of the relationship, the connection between the greenhouse effect and global climate change. Do you believe that there's nothing that humans can do about global warming? Okay. Now, if you don't think we have anything to do with global warming, if you just think this is the same thing that was going on 1,000 years ago and 10,000 years ago, the planet just goes through these big, long cooling phases and, like the one we're in right now, warming phases, and it's going to do it whether, we're doing the things we're doing or not. That's okay, but you have to ask yourself this question, okay? Are we having an effect? Like, for example, maybe the planet would be warming now anyway, but would it be warming as much as it's warming now? That's what you have to think about before you answer this question, okay? So you're going to pause the video. You're going to give that about 5 minutes to 7 minutes tops, I would say, just because, you have to, this is a bigger question. We're at the end of the unit. This is the last question for today's activity. So, this is might take a little bit more time. Not more than 7 minutes though, I'd say. Okay, so that is the last question, but it's not the last task. There's one more task for today. You scroll down to step number 5, and I want you to record our 2 new vocabulary terms, climate change and global warming, okay? Climate change and global warming. The definitions are right there in the distance learning document. So all you need to do is record them in your notes for activity 16, and then turn to your index, okay? In the letters C and G, make an entry for climate change, and then for global warming, and put the page number in your notes where you just wrote down the definitions. Okay? After you're done with our classwork, as is always the case, please send me your classwork so that I can give you full credit for your effort today. Okay? I need to see that classwork. Okay? I think by now we all have a good handle on how to get it to me. So that's your classwork for today, but it's not the end of our work, because today you do have homework, and you may have guessed it because it's similar to the homeworks you've been getting of late. We're going to go to BrainPop, and today we're going to search climate change. Climate change is what we're searching for in BrainPop. All the instructions, in case you may have forgotten how you get to BrainPop and go through that process of steps once you get there, of logging in, and I'm not going to go through them all because they're described right in the distance learning doc, and you've done this about a half dozen times already. So, but anyway, I need you to, when you finish your graded quiz, I need you to request that you send me the results by email. And then just fill out that little form with your name on it and my email address, the one I give you on the distance learning doc, which I will say to you right now because I want to do everything possible I can do to make sure that every one of you sends me your homework. So the email to send to is Staley, that's 2 S's, Taley, at stanfordct.gov. So Staley at stanfordct.gov. That's your homework for tonight. That's your work for today. Okay, I hope you don't have too much trouble. I hope you get something out of it. And tomorrow we have a little bit different of a day. Your classwork, and all you're going to have tomorrow is classwork, but it's going to be to review for Thursday's unit test. Now, how you go about reviewing really depends on your study habits and how comfortable you feel going into Thursday's test. But here's some suggestions, here's some ideas of things you can do. First of all, everyone's going to have classwork. It's going to be an assignment to go on to Kahoot. And I'll give you the code. I'll post it on the stream tomorrow, or maybe I'll post the link. I don't know, but I'll make sure we figure out how everyone can get there. Don't worry about it. There's 25 questions, and I'm recommending you spend however long it takes you to go through those 25 questions, but not more than 1 hour on your science classwork tomorrow. Okay. Now, once that's done, if you want to spend additional time and get ready for Thursday's test, here's some things you can do. Okay. One thing I think is always a good idea when you're studying or preparing for a test is, if there has been any new vocabulary introduced, to go over the vocabulary. Okay, so there's different ways you can do this. You can go through, if you've been good about your notes, you should have all the vocab in there, and you can go through. If you have someone who's willing to work with you, you make flashcards, or you have somebody quiz you on the vocabulary terms. They give you the definition, you give them the term. Okay? Then they give you the term, you give them the definition. Practice that way. That's how I did it when I was in 6th grade. My mom was really solid about that when I asked her to help me out. She was always there for me that way. So that's good. That's the vocabulary, okay? Another way you could do it would be to go through the activities in the textbook that we've learned. Most of the vocabulary is in the introductions. Another way is to just scroll through the glossary. It's only 2 pages. And just go word by word, and you'll see when you get to those weather and climate words, they'll jump out at you because you've defined them in this unit. There's a few different ways you could study your vocabulary, but if you want to do something a little bit more than doing the Kahoot to get you ready for this test, I would recommend going over your vocabulary. By the way, the test, okay, we haven't had a test in this 3rd marking period. So this test is worth 40%, probably 40% of your 3rd term marking period grade. Okay? That's a lot. Okay? So it's really important that you try your very best. You complete the test. You submit your work to me so I can give you a grade, because any grade is better than 0. Sadly, unfortunately, there are a couple of students who have not submitted their notebook binder checkups. That's 30% of your grade, and that's a 0. Now, when 30% of my grade is a 0, it doesn't really matter what the other 70% is. The other 70% could be 100, okay? If you take those 70% 100s and that 30% 0 and you put them together, do you know what you get? You get 70%. That means you could have had 100% going into the test. And if you don't submit the test and you take that 0 and put it together with your other 100%, you've taken your 100% for this science class for this whole 3rd marking period. And in one day, with one decision, you took it from 100% all the way down to 70%. No good. We don't want anybody doing that. Okay? So please, please, please. Now, here's the good news, okay? Because I don't want to get anybody nervous about this test. I mean, I could just imagine maybe some of you could say, oh, 40% of my grade. Wow, that's almost half, and, you know, this is going to make or break me and whatever. Well, not necessarily, okay? The main thing is that you try your best and you turn it in, okay? And that's all you really have any control over anyway, so we can't worry about anything else. So don't spend, if you're someone who kind of gets a little anxious going into tests, try not to do that, because, I don't know, I don't think it's not really going to help you at all. At the end of the day, it's a number on a piece of paper. What matters is how you approach taking the test, and not really the score you get. Because the learning experience is the knowledge that you guys have had a chance to pick up, and what you take away with it. That's what really counts. I mean, that's what you're going to bring with you to 7th grade when Mr. Harrison's class next year and Mrs. O'Neill's 8th grade science class, and moving on, you know, as you go on. That's what you're going to take. Number on a piece of paper, you're not even going to remember, probably, what you got in your weather and climate unit test at the end of 6th grade. Honestly, who's going to remember that in high school? But the knowledge, you'll take it with you forever. So anyway, so study the vocab. And then tomorrow we are going to have a couple of Google Meets. I think they're at 9:30 and 12:30. So I'll be there for any and all questions. And, you know, I can moderate any exchange of information. I'm hoping we'll have a good, you know, rich, worthwhile dialogue. But whether we do or we don't, I'm going to be there to answer your questions. So I recommend you tune into at least one of those 2 Google Meets tomorrow if you can. And the first one's early. It's at 9:30. So if you're up early and you get onto Kahoot and you go through that and you're free at 9:30, that might be great. You know, because it's just going to reinforce what we did. And I'll have Kahoot up, and we'll be able to refer to any of those questions. We can talk about vocab. You know, we can talk about any kind of a science concept that that you guys want to talk about. So we've got that if you feel like that could help you. Other than that, when the sun sets tomorrow night, and you probably won't see it set because it's going to be a gloomy, doomy, dreary, rainy day. But when it does, get some good quality sack time, get some good rest, and have a good breakfast if you can. Try to have as good of a breakfast as you can when you get up Thursday morning, because that can make a little bit of a difference of how your brain functions. Okay. So any other questions we'll deal with as they come. This has been a long video guide for today's lesson, which was a relatively short lesson, but we talked about some other things too. So I'm going to let you go, and we will do one of these again tomorrow, and maybe I'll see you during a meet on Tuesday. All right. Later, folks. Be good.